So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lady Lovelace, aka the Vampire Witch, and I do lots of stuff in the vampire subculture and community. I run a group called the Vampyre Coven, which is a worldwide online vampire community space that has around 17,000 people in it around the world. I am an elder of House O'Malley. I am the founder of House Omnia Corvus, two vampire houses within the community. What else do? I run events in what is known as the Mob Town Halo, which is basically just the vampire name for the Baltimore, Maryland area. And I think other than the Vampire Witch, I run a page. I am the Vampire Witch. I do a lot of work with the pagan and vampire communities through there. I run classes through that and all sorts of community resources. So I'm actually writing a vampire sociology course just to preface with how much and how involved this subject is. If you don't know what a real vampire is, it is somebody who identifies either in part or whole as the vampire archetype in some way. That manifests in a myriad of different ways, and that is like a whole conversation in and of itself. But the vampire community is essentially a community that is for people who identify as real vampires. And when I say community, that's a little bit of a mislabeling because it's really a whole lot of communities that complete this whole vampiric picture. But the vampire community is a community of people that all get together and express their vampiric nature together in one way or another. There is a lot of solitary practitioners also inside of this vampire community. So while it is a space for everyone to be together, it doesn't necessarily mean everybody is together, which is why I say that the vampire community is a little bit of a mislabeling, because you have pockets all over. You have all of your Ronin or solitary vampires. The houses that I was speaking about earlier, you have little familial pods that can come in houses or covens or any other little type of group orders or whatever. And through these organizations, these houses or whatever, people will ascend through their work, kind of like covens, how covens have first, second, third degree. You will have similar structures in houses or courts or whatever, where vampires will raise up through their teachings and their effort and whatnot. And eventually they become elders. The thing is with me and like what I see a vampire being is different than a bunch of people. So the popular thing with vampires, the popular idea is that vampires are individuals that need to feed on energy for one reason or another. Some people believe that it's due to an energetic deficiency based on like an energy body injury, or they have a higher turnover of pranic energy, which pranic energy, chi, ki, life force energy, all the same thing. And they believe they have a higher turnover of prana because they are constantly like at a baseline working magic of some sort. They have natural defenses, their senses are heightened or whatever, and therefore it causes them to burn their pranic energy quicker than a normal person, and therefore they need to feed on it. I personally don't think that's the long and short of it. A lot of people, that's the whole story. I do not agree. Okay. In my eyes, being a vampire is much deeper than what you feed on and the need to feed. Because in my personal experience, humans, everybody needs to feed. We're all constantly being drained by the energy or by the environment around us. Society is draining as fuck. And if you don't take care of your, energy health, you're going to feel drained. You're going to feel like shit. And then if you pick up the vampire narrative and you start working on that, it's going to track, obviously, because you're getting the benefits of the energy work. In my experience, the vampire is something that's imprinted on my soul, for lack of a better way to explain it. My spirit is vampiric. My vampiric nature comes out intrinsically all the time. Like it's honestly, my version of vampirism is a little bit closer to otherkin, which is a very unpopular correlation to make within the vampire community in some places. But otherkin are individuals that believe that they are either in whole or part non-human entity. There's Therians and there's otherkin. Therians believe that they are animal types. So like wolf people, cat people, whatever. Otherkin are your fae, sometimes your vampires, sometimes sirens, mermaids, whatever. They feel that they have a part or whole of their spirit is part mythical creature. It's, to me, being a vampire is more about how do I explain it? It's not necessarily how you react to things, but it's how your spirit carries itself. It's my vampiric nature. I'm very primal. My attitude is very, I can be cordial, and the vampire has the aristocrat flavor, but also I will rip your throat out. Yeah. And that comes out in my aura, my energy, the way I carry myself, the way I talk to people. And there is something in the Otherkin community called shifting, which is where your spirit and your attitude and everything shifts in alignment with your spirit. And that shift is where my vampiric nature comes out most. Like when I am it happens, it's a survival instinct. When I'm met with trouble, I shift and I turn into a beast. And people have seen this come out in me in person. When danger comes up, I will shift and I will thwart it. But it's such an instinctual, like I have no control over it. Like I shift into this nature and it's just like I am zoned into this primal creature that comes out in me, and it comes out in my magic. It comes out in my day-to-day life, and it's not something that I could get rid of. It's not something that I act upon. It's not something I do on purpose, although I can do it on. My magic is very animalistic, animistic. It's very, everything has spirit, everything has energy. I can interact and manipulate energies. I can feed on energies, and I can bring spirit in. I can have it manifest within me or outside of me. Like it's what people know is shamanism. It's very much aligned with that. When it comes to identifying as a vampire, the only real way that it's just an intrinsic knowing. It's hard to be like, this is what it looks like, this is what it is, because it's different for everyone. But for me, my work is very, obviously there's blood magic involved. That's a big part of it. But my practice pulls from, it's a lot of dark goddess energy. I work with chthonic energy a lot. I work in the underworld realms a lot. I pull from what is known as the River of Blood, which is a river that is in the underworld where all life goes back to and all life comes back out of. It's the river of, death and rebirth. Some people can equate it to, there's places in mythology that are very similar. It's not the river Styx, but it's very similar. But it's basically a river of ancestral blood. My practice as a witch is very similar as any other witch that does the dark goddess work, the dark, that dark energy, that very primal energy that they pull into their magic and whatnot. But everything I do, I like to say that it's painted with blood-colored glasses, because everything I do invokes that primal, I'm gonna make this happen energy. Why so much of the community has always congregated in these club environments, because the ambient energy that everyone is putting out and feeding on, it's just this giant ritual of energy cycling. I think that's why so many of us are drawn to nightclub events and going out and having these decadent experiences, because we feed off of them. And that's a big part of our experience as vampires, is that no matter what your reason, or no matter what the origin story for your personal flavor of vampirism, there is the commonality that everybody feeds in one way or another. Whether they're doing it unconsciously and they end up being the psychic vampire that is, discussed in Dion Fortune and Anton LaVey novels, the people that you go around that suck the fucking life out of you, they may or may not be unconscious vampires that, are going to maybe eventually end up in our community. They might go their whole lives being draining fucking people, and that sucks, but it happens, and we all know them. And they have this awakening, and they come and seek out the vampire community because they're trying to figure out how to curb these negative things that they're doing to other people by accident, and they're trying to learn how to control this. And figure out their urges, to want to feed on people. Some people have this desire. They're like, I want to start drama. I want to suck the life out of you. And they figure it out and they're like, maybe I could do something healthier and not have so much fucking turmoil in my life. And they go, and a lot of people express this need through art, through dancing, through all sorts of ways to get attention or energy. And I think one of the main points of being in the vampire community is having a space to freely express those needs without persecution. For example, sex workers. A lot of them are vampires. They fucking love the energy from it, but they're demonized for that. And they go out into the world and they try to express it and they're shut down for it. But they find comfort in having places, like I know there are some vampire events that are very kink related, BDSM related, and they do that so these people have somewhere to go to express this nature without being treated like shit for it. We are not physically immortal. You will hear about immortality in vampiric resources and classes and whatnot, but it's more like reincarnation, spiritual immortality, your spirit living past your physical death, stuff like that. Or even like my version of immortality is very much like the Vikings, like fame and glory. Like I want my name remembered after I die. I want to imprint on the world. That's my version of immortality. Can I make people vampires? There are two answers to this question. The first answer is fuck no, why would I want to do that? I just don't like talking about it usually because it promotes a narrative that people can be turned and they'll go seek it out, but that's not how it works. But in reality, there is something called sympathetic vampirism, that if I feed on you too much, suddenly you will have the onset of vampiric symptoms. That's not real vampirism. It's just you're like now energetically disabled for a hot second until you can fix it. And there are resources that say that you can go through this ritual that includes the overfeeding and then suddenly you're awakened. And I think, I'm not necessarily sure the ritual actually awakens people, rather than they're just suddenly really aware of the vampiric phenomenon. And now they're like, well, I'm it. So whether or not people can be turned in the spiritual sense is a gray area. I don't like being like, absolutely not, that's not possible ever, because I don't know that. However, some people have the vampire spirit, some don't. And I'm never going to be the person to pick it out and be like, you don't have it, you don't have it, you do, because I've seen people do that and it's rude. But there is absolutely a difference between I am clutching to this image because I like it and I'm doing energy work in the image of the vampire and I am one. Like when you get to know somebody well enough, you feel them in a room and you can feel it's them. That is their beacon. Vampires kind of have a signature to theirs that other vampires can pick up on, or even like donors will pick up on it unconsciously and like gravitate towards you, or like it's how, like if you're in a room full of people you don't know and suddenly you're having a conversation about vampirism with a stranger, they felt your beacon and knew it was safe to talk to you about that. And that happens to me all the time. So but on the flip side, you can kind of feel when someone doesn't have it either, because you get so used to other people with it that you're just like, eh. But it's still not a reason to look down on them either. Like if you're using the work responsibly, I'm never going to tell you you're not welcome. The answer to that changes vastly based on who answers it. I don't really go with the societal norms of the community ever. At this point, I would say Black Veil's vampirism is absolutely a religion. It's got the procedure, it's got the lore, it's got the mythology behind it. Like what Sebastian has built has become a religion for thousands of people. Like we can't ignore that. I think the idea of vampirism as a religion or vampirism as strictly a spirituality threatens certain types of vampires. Early to mid 2000s or like 2000, 2010-ish, I remember seeing a lot of pushback against the idea of vampirism as a spirituality or religion, because back then the idea that vampirism was strictly a disability or strictly a need, like you had your med sangs where it's like they needed to feed on sanguine feeding, blood feeding, for physiological reasons. It had nothing to do with energy, it had nothing to do with spirituality, and people, even side donors, it was all about their physical health. And in order to separate themselves from the people who, like the crazy like the I am Dracula types, the ones that come here and they're like, I'm gonna drink your blood and blah, 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 and like that kind of shit. So there was a lot of pushback against those who treated it like a medical physiological need versus spirituality, just to give themselves credibility. Because they were doing a lot of research studies, like medical ones with college like research and whatnot. They were really serious about it, and that to protect themselves, there was a lot of disconnect. And there was even the belief that like you could not be a vampire and practice spirituality for a second. And a lot of that narrative is the reason why I'm so loud in my spirituality. And like, I rock the aesthetic, and it doesn't make me less of a vampire for it. I wear fangs, I do magic, I do all the things that would delegitimize you back in the day, because that narrative of that delegitimization fucked a lot of people up in my generation. And I talked to a lot of people about it, that they felt so ostracized because they had this experience that did not match what everybody was saying, and they felt like they could not speak up about their experiences because they were going to be treated like shit about it. They were going to be treated like role players. In the night side, it's honestly generally taught to people when they get here that they should have separation. Not only for the reasons you were speaking about, so you have that, like you can shift into your night side, but also to protect yourself. You need to create your sobriquet. You need your nickname that you can separate the community completely. Because like I know personally people that they've gone through nasty divorces and they've had to shut their whole night side down because suddenly they're trying to take custody of the kids and they're using, hey, she thinks she's a vampire over here, in custody battles and shit like that. So like not only for your spiritual splitting, so you're not bleeding your day side and night sides together, because that's the other thing, is you want to try to have your day side balanced with your night side. You don't want to dive too much into the night side and your day side gets fucked up. That's one of the main principles when you get to the vampire community. It's like you need to have that day side balance. You need to be able to step back and like not be vampire for a second as well. Like as much as I'm in this 24/7, there are moments where I'm in like a tank top and shorts sitting in the sun like a houseplant. Trying to think of what the most important advice would be. I know one of the most important pieces of advice I could give anyone who comes to want to reach out to the community: you do not need to belong to a group. I find so many people who feel so alone in what they are that they're like, I need to find a family. I'm grateful for the experience. However, I could have saved myself a lot of heartache if I would have slowed down. There are so many books out there. Like my coven group is not like the public one. It's not like you're initiating into a coven. Like I said, there's 17,000 people in there. I'm not the high priestess for 17,000 people. Holy shit. Somebody wants to dip their toes in, come seek me out. Come be part of that. We've got a book list. We've got some basic teachings. You know, we got some weirdos too, so you can get some knowledge of what that looks like. If you really want to join something, I open my doors to you. But you do not need to pledge allegiance to anyone, because the people that will reach out to you, or when you go into a group and say, hey, I want to join something, it is the bottom of the barrel, I want to abuse you people that will reach out and suck you in. Because quality groups do not take cold members. Vampire Awakening is no different than any other spiritual awakening. It's like I said, it's just painted with the vampire paintbrush. You start to realize things about you that align with the vampirism, and then suddenly you're awake to the fact that, oh shit, I might be a vampire. And then you start to cascade into like, what if I am? Oh my God, all these things make sense now. My past memories are now starting to align with what I'm now seeing about myself. And then it's like, oh my God, I'm so alone because nobody understands and I have no one to talk to. And it's just like that, oh my God, like all this thing's happening, I have no one to talk to. I need to find a group so I can feel welcome, I can feel acknowledged, I can feel like I'm part of something. And that's natural to feel like that. But it's just like, you gotta take a breath, read some books. There's even there's less websites out there now, but there's websites out there and I'll send you like a whole resource list so you can post it in your comments or whatever. And so here's advice number 2. To learn about vampirism, you do not only have to read vampire books. Vampirism is all about energy work at its core. If you're a spiritual vampire, I know like there's med-sangs and there are people that feel like they have to like drink blood for their physical health and stuff like that. That is not what I'm talking about. But if you are a psi vampire, someone who feeds on energy, someone who believes in the spiritual vampire side, energy workbooks are great. I am currently reading It's Energy Work, Secrets of Healing and Spiritual Growth by Robert Bruce.
Okay.
And it is, so far, I've gotten like a third of the way through it, but it is great for energy work, for learning energy work. It's super quick to be sharing information too. Like within the first chapter, it gives you an entire body map of like energy centers, and it teaches you, rather than just the 7 chakras, which it does have the 7 chakras, but it also has points where you take in energy, the different like pathways between, it's like primary, secondary, and tertiary energy centers throughout your entire energy body. And it's a good one. Definitely, I recommend it to everyone, every witch, every vampire. It is a good primer for energy work. Father Sebastian's work, while controversial to some, is very thorough, and our community is based on a lot of it. So whether or not you have a good opinion of him, it's a great place to start. The Black Veils Master Vampire Edition is the most complete of the Black Veils. The Black Veils, for those of you that don't know what that is the vampire community has different sets of codes of conduct, laws. They're more like guidelines anyway, but vampiric sets of ethics and laws and whatnot. And the Black Veils was one of the original ones from the 90s, from when the community really got its start. But he has expanded upon that and created kind of like a manual that has everything you need to start within the community itself, because vampire community has a lot of nuance when it comes to things like social structures and etiquette. And like I said, are guidelines. You don't have to dress a certain way to be a vampire. That's ridiculous. I mean, for some events they have a dress code, but like, get fancy, have fun. And then there's Don Webb's book, Energy Magic of the Vampire, which is a very different look at vampirism, because his perspective comes from his experience with the Order of the Vampire and the Temple of Set. So his style is very left-hand path because of that, whereas Sebastian's style is also inspired by that, but also very inspired by chaos magic, ceremonial magic. Here's a tiny history. Let's see if I can get it right though. Temple of Set formed from Michael Aquino leaving the Church of Satan. And the Temple of Set believes that the Egyptian god Set is like the first incarnation of Satan, I think, something like that. Michael Aquino's wife Lilith founded the Order of the Vampire in the early 80s. And that is one of the first vampire organizations, I believe, because it was the Order of the Vampire, and then the Temple of the Vampire got their nonprofit status in like 89 or something. And the Temple or Order of the Vampire was 84. The things when people first get here, it's like they first find Sebastian, and Sebastian's knowledge is great. His events are beautiful, but that's not the whole story. Right. And there's a lot of history and nuance pre-Sebastian, and there's a lot of history and nuance during Sebastian's era that has nothing to do with him as well. It's just like you have to, once you find the first thing, don't stay there. Don't just land there and latch onto that, because that is also another thing young vampires do. One of the first books everybody recommends when you get to the vampire community is Michelle Bellinger's Psychic Vampire Codex. And that book is another one very great to read. Definitely read that. However, that book is very much in alignment with the idea that energetic need, vampiric need, is due to like an injury of the energy body. And therefore it's always about maintenance and upkeep and making sure that you don't get run down and like mitigating risk of not feeding. And that's great information. But it's also mildly limiting, because you're always getting to zero. You're never pushing past zero to reach the power of the vampire, in my opinion. Which is not necessarily how they, Michelle and House Kepru doesn't necessarily treat vampirism that way either. It's just because of the narrative of that book and what's been repeated through the community, it has had a big effect on the way people view vampirism. And if you view any of the media that talks about vampirism from back then, you will find that narrative of, I need to feed to be well. Because when I was young, I awakened when I was 12. So I awakened when I was 12 and started practicing magic at the same time. I have undiagnosed ADHD and bipolar 2 as well. So I'm like mentally ill, think I'm a vampire. I'm feeding and it's helping, great. It's clearly because I have this energy deficiency and, you know, I latched onto this energetic disability narrative for so long because it tracked. Once I finally hit a better baseline in my life, I realized that there's so much more to vampirism than just maintaining. And I wonder if it's like, because they always say you never just have one spiritual awakening. And I've heard in the past that when you awaken as a vampire, it happens over and over and over. You will shed layers of the conditioning and stripping yourself of societal conditioning and allowing yourself to live an authentic way without worrying about the conditioning that you've gotten through your life and untangling that mess. Like, you can be better. You do not, like, if you feel like shit right now, you don't have to tomorrow. And if you want to get up and do something about it, let's fucking do it. Like, and I'm always trying to be encouraging, because that is the, like, the predator aspect of the vampire doesn't have to be, I'm gonna do something to you. Being an alpha individual doesn't necessarily mean I'm gonna fuck you up, because teaching people how to be that alpha person, it's not necessarily I'm gonna be an alpha because I'm gonna be above you. It's I'm gonna be alpha because I'm gonna teach you how to also be alpha, and we're gonna go kill shit together. You're beautiful. Don't let anybody tell you differently.
Thank you so much for taking out the time to give your wisdom, share your wisdom.
Of course, anytime.
So that's it for now. I love you all, and Into the Shadows.